Namaste! Greetings, YouTube family. My name is Steve. I'm a spirituality researcher, and today we're going to be talking about multidimensionality, and specifically a wonderful, amazing holiday gift that is very graciously being given to you from your soul family, and that I'm honored to share with you, a gift that may save you many lifetimes. So let's take a look. Now, before we get into the heart of this presentation, I want to honor the Tachi Yokuts, who are the rightful indigenous curators of the land where I'm presenting this presentation to you. And I'm very honored that I'm able to do this, and I want to firmly acknowledge them as the rightful curators of this land, because they've been here for many millennia before the United States was ever a thing, and they've attended to the stewardship of this land in sustainable harmony up until that time. And war is never just, but even if war were considered just, this land was not taken in a war. It wasn't the spoils of a war. It was taken through fraud and manipulation, and that's of course not right. And in just the course of a couple hundred years, we're on the brink of environmental catastrophe, and the people that have been here for millennia in advance, who knew what they were doing, have been suppressed and silenced unjustly in violation of basic agreements. And that's not right. They are the rightful curators. They know what they're doing. And it's a terrible situation because we have government judges, the Supreme Court, who are deciding cases in which the government is a party. Conflict of interest. And when they're doing this, of course they're going to decide that the government is right, and they'll do it on whatever ridiculous basis they can come up with, despite the evidence. And currently, the basis of the United States claiming land rights is to point to a doctrine from the Catholic Church in the 1400s through a series of proclamations from the Pope that says essentially that you can colonize the Western world, and that's just fine. Displace indigenous folks and just take control of the whole situation. And the Catholic Church, just this year, a long time after, but better late than never, the Catholic Church this year backed off from that doctrine. They said they no longer support it. And yet it still stands as the basis of U.S. law as to how the United States is claiming land ownership, because the Catholic Church said so in the 1400s, even though they don't say so anymore. And that doctrine from the Catholic Church in the 1400s has been cited repeatedly by the Supreme Court, including as recently as about 20 years ago. They refer to the doctrine of discovery, the Catholic Church giving the United States permission to just own the land. Is it unreasonable? Of course. Is it unjust? Absolutely. And yet the United States is holding on to that land. And the justice system is supposed to be about justice. It's supposed to be about blind justice. Blind meaning neutral, not blind as in, we'll just reach for whatever we can find to try to prove that we're right and not upset the apple cart. It's an unfortunate situation. And I'm not a judge on the Supreme Court, but I am a citizen, and I do have a voice, at least for now. And being that I have a voice, I'm going to use it, and you can use yours as well. So when you're beginning a video, beginning a meeting, a presentation, if you can find out whose land you're on, and I'll put a link in the video description, and I'll put it on the screen right here. You can go to that link and learn about whose land you're on, which indigenous tribe has rightful seniority over that land. And you can acknowledge them. And culturally, if we do these land acknowledgements, we value the indigenous folks who have the rightful stewardship seniority of this land, and we value their input. We can make a change, because if one person impacts another person, that fire just spreads one to another. And if the whole population has a point of view on something, the government will do what it inevitably always does, which is eventually follow the population. They can pretend they're in charge, but at the end of the day, if the population says one thing, the government, if it wants to look like it is connected with the population, is going to end up saying the same thing. So if we acknowledge that indigenous folks have rightful curation seniority of their land, then that will eventually become the recognized truth. And it is already the recognized truth by me, and if it resonates with you, between the two of us and the others watching this video, hopefully as well. We're sort of we're elaborating on this topic that wasn't really the core of the video, but it is very important, and it's something that not a lot of people understand at this stage, and hopefully they will in the future, because of people like you and me that can share it with them and spread this truth. And indigenousness is not a random culture. It's naturality. It's being in harmony with nature. It's keeping things simple, intuitive, heartfelt, sincere, reputable, high integrity, high sustainability. It's not a random flavor in terms of a wide spectrum. It's a culture that's very specifically focused upon harmony with nature, upon truth, upon keeping things simple, accurate, sustainable. And simplicity is a very key element of this, because if we don't have line of sight to what we're doing, how can we be doing it responsibly? We have to hold accountability for our decisions. And that ties into this next point that I want to introduce before we get into the core, and I promise we're going to get there. The other point is that anything that's presented in this presentation up to now and after now, from me or anybody else, anytime you're presented with information, don't just take it at face value. Take what resonates with your heart. Again, keeping things simple, keeping them true. Be true to your conscience. Every soul is born with a conscience. That conscience is the part of them that tells them situationally, what the best course of action is. There is no one size fits all answer to reality. Situations are complex. There's gray area all around us, immersively all the time. So our conscience is the part of us that enables us to navigate that truth. And if we don't rely upon our conscience, the only alternative is to defer, to obey orders. And we learned from World War II, in the Nuremberg trials of the Nazis, that just obeying orders is not a defense. It's a little bit better than not. It's a little bit better than just rampaging on your own, but following orders is still not a defense. You're supposed to not be a machine. A machine can follow orders. That's what a soulless machine does. It just follows orders. But that's not what souls are supposed to do. You're supposed to be responsible to your conscience more so than following orders. And if you really think about that, you can pause the video, play it back, think about it some more. If you are responsible to your conscience more than you are to obeying orders, then what is government really governing? If the government is telling you to obey orders, but you're expected to follow your conscience supremely to those orders, why do you need the orders at all? I mean, the orders, what's necessary are social conventions so we know how to communicate with one another, but we can't order each other to do things, because if we actually do that and we just blindly obey orders, then we all just turn into a bunch of robots. We behave like the Nazis, and we all obey orders. We don't think for ourselves. We don't use common sense. We don't have compassion. We don't have understanding. And is that really the future we want? Do we want artificial intelligence specifically? Do we want just soulless, dispassionate order obedience curating the world? That seems to be the fast track right now. Is that really what you want? Do you really want super powerful things that blindly obey orders, that don't have a conscience and don't care about conscience any more than what some random person programmed into it, what some random team assigned to the software? Do you want something with no conscience ruling the world? Doesn't sound like a good idea to me. And along these lines, again, you can play back the video because a lot of coordination, a lot of thought has gone into this, and I'm presenting it to you very quickly. You can play back the video. If you have questions, I can help address them in the comments. But think about this. Every act of existing, your heart beating, your breathing, any thought that enters your mind, any words that come out of your mouth, anything that you do, it's always derivative of trust. There's always upstream trust of your sources. Like if you're breathing, you're trusting that what you're taking into your lungs has the proper amount of oxygen in it. If you're presenting a video like this, you're trusting the parties upon whose information parts of it are based. And so there's trusting of sources, and there's trusting of audiences. So with everything, there's upstream trust and there's downstream trust. Upstream trust of the sources, downstream trust of the audience. And it's not just videos, it's everything. There's always upstream trust and downstream trust. So if you sit in a chair and your heart beats and you breathe, or if you go for a walk, or if you fall asleep and your heart is still beating and your mind is wandering, or as long as you are conscious in some manner, there is trust happening, so you can't avoid it. So the idea of being fearful really doesn't make any sense because everything that is dynamic, everything that has any greater power than something that has no power is based upon trust. So if you're still, you're trusting. If you're moving, you're trusting. If you're conscious, you're trusting. No matter what you do, you're trusting. And so if you're trusting, then be brave and face the darkness. And by the way, the darkness doesn't exist because everything that exists is in one way or another based upon trust. Every action that takes place has upstream trust and downstream trust. So the idea of something that is not based upon trust doesn't work. I mean, there's only misunderstanding. Yeah, I'll give you that. There's misunderstanding, there's confusion. But do you resolve the confusion by becoming more confused or less confused? Less confused would mean that you understand the nature of reality more and you invest more into trust. And this video on these dimensions is part of an understanding of reality. That's sort of another soapbox here, but we live in a very technical society that has high precision, many decimal points on its financial figures, but not much thought into the fact that the fiat money is not keyed to anything, and it's issued by a government that curates the right to create money. So how are you supposed to generate money for the government when it's the only one that's allowed to curate it? They'll just add it to your tab, and then when you can't pay that, they'll add more to your tab, and you're in debt forever. It doesn't really make any sense. This society is not really thinking about the big picture. And if we sort of dial back to the beginning of our lives, when we are in kindergarten, we learned a lot in preschool, kindergarten in terms of how to get along, how to care for one another. And it didn't require rules, didn't require police, didn't require money. Yes, the teachers were being paid, but nobody goes into preschool education because it's a big cash festival. They get into it for the desire to want to make a difference, and that's what it's all about. Do we want people who are doing what they think is right, or are we having people follow orders in order to get worthless money, destroying the world in the process, rather than attending to the world on the basis of their hearts? And we say that all people are equal, we say that everybody matters, but that's not what our policies reflect. If everybody mattered, then we would look at the world's poorest and we would attend to their well-being before anybody else's, and we would surf the situation as it goes, attending to the poorest first, and that's what advanced civilizations do. They don't just say, oh yeah, the money doesn't make any sense, the government doesn't make any sense, but we'll go with the flow, not upset the apple cart or keep ruining the world and have our kids figure out the knot that we're not untangling but making worse. And that's, you aren't responsible for the entire world, you're only responsible for yourself. But within the dominion of yourself, you are fully responsible, and that's what conscience means, that you have responsibility for yourself. You need to be able to trust yourself, because if you don't trust yourself, okay, then you're being untrusting. So what is it that you are doing? Then you're treating yourself as being untrustworthy, and then you treat others as untrustworthy, and the situation expands from there. So it's important to trust yourself. What's the worst case scenario? You change your mind later. You're allowed to change your mind. You're supposed to change your mind. You're supposed to grow. Do the best you can with what you're given. Nothing else can be expected of you. And you may say, well, what if other people need to do something first and then I'll trust them? Well, the definition of trust is what happens before you get results. Trust is, if you got results first, it wouldn't be trust. But I understand where that line of thinking is coming from, that if somebody else exercises some trust in one area, then that makes it easier for you to exercise trust in a different area. And together, like popcorn popping, we can all just kind of make our small contributions with momentum that builds as a collective. And it all comes down to conscience. And when push comes to shove in something like the Nuremberg trials, and the scrutiny is really on it, people recognize, conscience supersedes orders. And if you take that to its logical conclusion, that doesn't apply just to Nazi trials. It applies to everything. Are you being true to your conscience, or are you obeying orders? Now, I realize it's important to to go with the flow to the extent of living another day, so to speak, in making a difference in the long run. I totally understand that. But at the same time, we need long-range line of sight to what it is we're doing in order to make the best possible difference in the world. So I know we're talking about a lot here, and you're most welcome to play this video back and look at these topics in greater detail, ask any questions. I'm happy to help to the extent that I can, and everything I'm providing is a composite of many souls in coordination with a lot of research. So everything's a team effort. Don't think it's just coming from me. I'll take credit for the mistakes, but I'm just trying to help in terms of everything else. So it's important to obey your conscience, because that's what it all comes down to. It's very simple. It's what we teach our children, and that's how society is supposed to work. I will get to the multidimensionality, but it's important to understand these foundational concepts, because if we don't have a basic understanding of reality, we can't navigate it very well. I mean, if we're not based if we're not based in reality, think about it. If we're not based in reality, isn't that kind of a problem? I mean, we need to have a strong understanding of reality, and the truth of it is that reality is spiritual. And there are many different religions. There are hot button differences between them, but at the end of the day, if you look at all the world's religions, look at their websites, peel the lettering off of them, they're all saying the same thing. They're all saying be loving, caring, and kind. That's the highest priority. Okay, well, if we all agree it's the highest priority, let's live our creed. If that's the highest priority, let's make that the highest priority and get along with one another. And if you follow the logic that everything is based upon trust, well, then why should we be mistrustful of one another, since there can only be misunderstandings at best? And if everything is based upon trust, we should be able to get along with one another. It's not really that difficult. It just requires an understanding of reality. Stepping back, looking inside yourself, coordinating with what's inside of you, which is connected to everything else, and understanding how reality works. And that's the spiritual nature of things. We're all connected. We're all part of the same reality. Everything is based upon trust, and the physical world is the physical world, or anything else we perceive, are perceptions. They're assumptions. We assume patterns. With science, we assume patterns. We see something happening a few times, we think it'll happen more times. And when there's reliability, that we call that a scientific law. That's convenient, except for all the times when that law is broken, which we call metaphysics and spirituality, and which 80% of the world believes in, and which there's more evidence than we can possibly assemble in one stage. So it's nice to say that everything adheres to scientific law. It's just not true. If you take all the evidence that violates scientific law and you put it in one bucket and call it worthless, you have a perfect batting record. If you count all the times that you strike out and everything else, perfect batting record. But if we actually look at the evidence, different situation. And again, it just comes down to common sense. If you perceive a pattern, that's an assumption. That pattern doesn't have to hold. There's no obligation for that pattern to hold. As we've already talked about, everything condenses to trust. So if everything condenses to trust, patterns are technical, they're arbitrary, they're assumptions. They may work in certain contexts, they may randomly stop working in others. And so if you're fully leveraged on the reliability of patterns, you're fully leveraged on your own assumptions. And you could say, well, those assumptions coordinate with my conscience. If they do, then you're on the right track for the path that you're taking. But if it also resonates with you that scientific law is being broken, as can be widely attested across time, well known indigenously around the world, and recognized by the majority of the world's population, and broadly attested in terms of whistleblowers describing with extreme credibility the government's knowledge of metaphysics and extraterrestrial activity, our soul family from beyond Earth. You can decide for yourself where the truth is. And again, there are no one-size-fits-all right answers. There are different ways of looking at things and different ways of evolving. But if we look at the situation and everything condenses to trust, just from a back of the envelope quick analysis that, to me, at least to me, makes intuitive sense, then whatever angle you take looking at things, shouldn't you arrive at the same conclusion? You could say, well, you're assuming things, Steve. Yes, I'm assuming things. We can't but assume things. I guess the question comes down to, do we throw out inconvenient evidence or not? Because, at least to me, there's extremely credible evidence of metaphysics and spirituality, not just in my own life, which is extreme, but what really persuaded me of this initially were the decades of whistleblowers organized by Dr. Stephen Greer, who attest to this. A large number of whistleblowers from many walks of life attesting to this repeatedly over decades, and the government never saying boo to them in terms of legal disputes to their claims. So you can assess for yourself whether the situation is true or not. All these whistleblowers attesting that the government is, is covering these things up, and the government saying, well, we don't want to shine a light on that through legal action, and also don't want to shine a light on that through legal action, and also don't want to shine a light on that through legal action, and also not even disputing it in terms of sealed litigation. If they could just kind of squash this by filing frivolous litigation and then holding this up in court forever, and they're not doing that either. So things are complicated. You can read from that at one level the government is not standing in the way of this information getting out, and in other contexts, as we talked about with the indigenous people, it is upholding a system that is quite unjust. And so, you can play back the video, think about these things carefully. What I would say is that if you piece this all together, at the end of the day, conscience is what matters. And if the government were to come out and say, everybody obey your conscience, then everybody would say, well, that's really good advice. The government is great. Let's keep the government around forever. Whereas if people actually obey their conscience, they can see for themselves that you don't need somebody to tell you to do what you should recognize for yourself is the right way of doing things in the first place. So that was a nice video. Talked about a lot of stuff except what we were intending to get to, and we will get to that now. I'm sorry I went so long, but these are important topics, and more important than actually the core of this video. And since you've gone through those topics, let's get into the core of the session now. Okay, I want to express my extreme gratitude and beyond infinite blessings to the soul family member who appeared in the cameo there, as we were talking about how the government did not want its cover-up of metaphysics to come to light. Beyond infinite blessings to that member of our soul family. It's just wonderful for you to be with you, for you to appear this way, and for us to be harmonized in sharing this message that is immensely appreciated. And along these lines of what we're talking about in terms of trust and harmony, the idea is not to go to war with the government and start another conflict. The whole idea is trust. Everybody is innately trusting. Even if you think you're making mistakes, you're trusting what you think is right within that context. And you may change your mind a split second later, but you're always doing what you trust is right. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it. And yes, you may regret it extremely within a split second later, or you may not regret it at all for a century. It all depends what particular path you're taking, and there is no right or wrong answer in the long run, as long as you're trusting your conscience, which you cannot but do. But again, it sort of condenses to how much you're paying attention to your conscience. Are you paying any attention to your conscience? Are you extremely immersed in it? And there are no one-size-fits-all answers. It's a path. It's a gray area. There are subtleties to the situations. And so, again, conscience can lead you through those. Now, in terms of reality and the experiences that we have, we talked about trust and how we need trust as the basis of creation. So, although we're all comprised of the same substance, which we could describe as trust, If we were all powerful, we would be zero powerful, because if we're all powerful, there's no power left to pursue. It's like if you have a poker hand and you start playing your cards, you either have the hand or you play the hand. It's one or the other. You can't have your cake and eat it too. There's either potential or reality, one or the other. And so, in order for us to trust, which is the basis of creation, then we need to enter a reality where there's an opportunity for us to trust. There are things we don't know. There are things to explore. There are ways to engage. There are ways to be creative. So we enter an opportunity to be trusting. We use trust. Trust is the basis of creation. There is upstream trust, downstream trust. We create. We exercise our creative muscle. Our creative muscle inspires us to explore further areas. So that's how reality works. We always want to follow our conscience and be harmonized with the beacon of what is most right and true. But that definition of what is most right and true also encompasses where we are right now, because it was a choice. Everything is based upon trust. We trustingly chose to enter this experience we're in right now as a way to grow, a way to explore. And if everything is trust, which it is, there's nothing to fear. So even though there can be a lot of what we consider corruption, all it really is a situation of other people doing what they think is right according to their conscience. And you may say, well, this person is doing what they know is wrong. Well, if they're doing it out of pure greed, then if they did what they knew was wrong, they would be generous instead of greedy. And they're doing what they think is right, whether their prime motivation is themselves or others. And if the prime motivation is themselves, sooner or later they're going to wake up and realize that they aren't going to get very far. And why is that going to happen? Because everything requires trust. If they keep being somebody nobody wants to engage in terms of trust, then they'll have no opportunity to advance. And so, everything requires trust, and there's nothing to fear. Now, we go through a sequence of incarnations in order to learn things, and we can also go through experiences that aren't even incarnations. But let's everything is a simplification. So we're trying to present models that are helpful within a certain context. Then, of course, they'll reach their limitations and they'll have to be replaced or updated. Or just trying to present information that's generally helpful. So, okay, so let's get into this. So, the first spiritual density would be the lesson of awareness. Now, if you want to learn about awareness, you could incarnate as something like earth or a stone, and a stone is largely just going to reside in one location, but it will be in the perceptions of others. So if you're an earth human walking by and you see a stone, and maybe you skip it across a creek, the stone is causing you to have a reaction with it. You're engaging in trust. You're assuming the stone is not going to explode like a grenade. There's some level of trust from the parties engaging with you, and with you as the stone engaged with everybody else, because you being a stone are comprised of mineral content from other locations, and you're trusting that mineral content will remain cohesive together. There's upstream trust, downstream trust, extremely subtle, yes, but there's trust nonetheless. And so once that trust is recognized, there's awareness, and that's the first spiritual density. And then the second spiritual density would be something like action. So instead of incarnating like stone or water or fire or light or wind in the first density, you may incarnate like something like a plant or a shrub in the second density, maybe a small animal. Technically, we should probably call all creatures souls or people, because we're all more similar than different. But let's say you incarnate as a plant. You're growing roots, you're growing leaves, you're engaged with your environment. So there's a further level of upstream and downstream trust. And once there's acumen in that area, then we could incarnate into a being that is more oriented toward planning. So that would include vessels like ours, where there's a lot of abstract intelligence in terms of piecing information together, not necessarily intelligence in terms of net good. I mean, you could argue extremely well that Earth humans are parasitic to the natural environment, and take that as motivation to change the course of history with your own life, to prove that we are having a net positive influence because we are necessary. You saw the member of our soul family on camera there. If that glowing orb just appeared and started speaking, people would treat it like God. I mean, they wouldn't even listen to what the orb is saying. They would dispute, is it real or is it fake? That would be the main venue, and then they would either say, it would just become a superficial mess because it's not, the final mile is not connected with a vessel that's familiar to you. So by providing telepathic insights to me and me sharing those with you, there's a continuum that provides a level of comfort, and whether you're aware of it or not, every thought that enters your mind is in the venue is in the astral venue, and you're receiving telepathic insights all the time, and you're sharing them, again, whether you're aware or not. And so all of us are necessary. It's true that culturally, Earth humans for a very long time have been, not helping the state of the Earth. But if things are going to be cleaned up, we have the opportunity to do that. And the very fact that we're here and that the Earth needs to be cleaned up would intuit that we should be the ones cleaning it up, not only because it's our problem, but because if the prime objective were just to clean up the Earth, the easy answer is get rid of the people that are making a mess of it. And that didn't happen. And we incarnated as Earth humans. So both higher beings and our own souls ourselves have agreed through logic that we are going to be involved in the cleanup. So we can either do what we agreed to do, or we cannot do it, and you should follow your conscience. And there are no right answers, but I would hope that it resonates with you that if our culture has made a mess, and we are here now with an opportunity to clean it up, and just as easily, the universe could have said, this culture has blown all its chances. It doesn't deserve to be around anymore, and yet we're here. Again, at least to me, you can intuit that we're here because we're supposed to clean up our mess, and that as you saw, we have help doing it. But everything is a collaborative effort. The higher beings that are part of our family are not our maid service. That would make them lower beings, and they're not our maid service, and they're also not our authorities. We're not supposed to blindly obey their orders, and we're also not supposed to expect them to blindly obey our orders. We're supposed to be a family. We're supposed to collaborate. We're supposed to share with one another. They have advantages. We have advantages. They have the advantages of wisdom and spiritual capabilities, and we have the advantages of being able to talk to one another and to deliver messages without being seen as, quote, other. And so if we work together, we can accomplish a lot. And your responsibility is your own life. If you want to impact other lives, you can certainly provide voluntary guidance, and hopefully that resonates with others if that's what it's meant to do. But at the end of the day, you're responsible for your life, and everything is a team effort as to how we get things done. I know that sounds a little bit contradictory, but let's parse it out to make sure there's no confusion there. You are responsible for the state of your soul as guided by your conscience, but being that everything is an exercise in trust, there's also the responsibility of recognizing that everything is a team effort. So you're responsible for your soul. You're also responsible for being a member of a team, recognizing that nothing happens alone. And with trust being the glue that ties all of it together, the takeaway is you should never force others to do something, and others should never force you to do anything. And at the end of the day, neither of you really can, because you are your souls. Your souls are not being taken away. You're going to do what your soul does. I guess if we parse it out, you don't want to be so intimidating that others are broken from their consciences. You want to coordinate in a way that's helpful, voluntary, productive, cohesive, familial, rather than manipulative, abusive, dominating, aggressive. And and so we want to be trusting as we coordinate. I realize we're talking about a lot of different things here, and I usually try not to be long-winded at all, but I'm experimenting with a new delivery format, and we'll see how this goes with the audiences. But hopefully it's helpful for you, and you can let me know in the comments what you think about it. But we're talking about the spiritual densities. We talked about the first one, we talked about the second one, and then with the third one, we're focusing upon thought and planning and strategizing as to our objectives, not just acting upon them, but planning them out in advance. And then with the fourth spiritual density, we're making a decision. We want to choose our loyalty. Is our loyalty mainly to ourselves, or is our loyalty mainly to others? Do we love ourselves more than we love others, or do we love others more than we love ourselves? And most people would say the definition of love is care, compassion, and that's correct, and that implies care, compassion of others, and that's how the vast majority of the population, would look at the situation. Love means caring about others, but you can also choose love of self, and if you do, and you choose yourself over others, you can imagine that you won't be perceived as trustworthy for very long. So in the grand scheme, you aren't going to have many collaborators of trust, and without collaborators of trust, there will be incapacity to get things done, and eventually to get anything done. So the wiser course of action, at least as I see it, would be to instead of pursuing a dead-end road, pursue a road that gets you to your destination. And that road would be the reality that everything is trust, and that your higher loyalty should be to society, should be to the collective, rather than to yourself. So a litmus test for this would be, if there's a sinking ship, is it more important to evacuate the ship and be the last one off, or more important to push others out of the way and be the first one off? These are extreme examples, but the idea is that you want to prioritize the collective over yourself. Do you want to live for something in terms of helping the collective, or die for nothing in terms of just helping yourself? If, in terms of where we are in history, do we want Earth to become a better place, and it's okay if we end up not living to see it because that's part of what ends up being encompassed within our contribution? Is the cause more important than this individual life experience, or is this individual life experience just all that matters to us? And the more the things become stark and obvious and very binary, do you really want to be a stone cold killer, or do you want to be somebody who just loves everyone? I mean, if you look at the extremes, things become much more obvious than they are in the subtleties. So once we make the decision to love, then and one way or the other, without a washy middle ground, once we've at least decided to be more loving to others than to ourselves, then we graduate into the fifth density. We don't want to get into the weeds here, but for the most part, that's how it works. Now, people could advance from the fourth density beyond, still in the mindset of loving the self, but long story short, they won't get very far because there isn't very much trust, and they'll have to harmonize with love being love of all more than love of self. So let's just think about it that way. So that's the fourth density, becoming more loving of everyone. And then the fifth density is wisdom. So let's say in the fourth density you become a martyr. The first cause that crosses your field of vision, you just die for that cause. Okay, so you're a martyr. You've sacrificed yourself for the cause, but have you really done the best you could? Because if you die for the first cause that crosses your field of vision, maybe it's, the cause has value, but in the grand scheme, it may be a low priority cause. And if you just truncate all of the rest of your life, forfeit that for this relatively small cause, have you really made the best overall contribution you could? A smarter course of action, a wiser course of action, we should say, would be to look at the bigger picture and be strategic in how you fight your battles. maybe don't sweat the small stuff and focus upon big strategic priorities that can make the most impact. So the fifth density would be looking at the situation from the standpoint of the collective versus looking at the situation from the standpoint of yourself in the fourth density. So from the standpoint of the fourth density, just be a martyr with the first cause that crosses your field of vision. That's what it really condenses to. And then with the fifth density, it would be, provide all the service that you possibly can for the overall collective, the best way that you can. Okay, so that would be like many decades of many contributions in many different ways, and it sounds really good, and it is good, but as with everything, it has its weaknesses. Like if you're focused always on the big picture, always on the collective, then you could say, well, okay, it doesn't matter that I'm rude and unkind in the short run with people that cross my path because I'm just fixated on this long range perspective. So there also needs to be an ability to go with the flow and to improvise and to recognize that no model is perfect, and you're going to have to compromise in how you do things, and the in process, the process matters as well. And so that takes us to the sixth density of love in combination with that overall wisdom. And then if we've sort of looked at both sides of the spectrum, the short run in terms of improvisation and the long run in terms of wisdom, then the next question is, okay, can we look at the things in between? And so we do so, and that takes us into the seventh density. And then if we expand that idea of unification to everything, we enter the eighth density, at least as I understand it, and also the beginning of the next octave. Now, once we make the decision at the fourth density to be more loving to all than to the self, in other words, once we choose the road that gets us somewhere rather than the dead end, then there's also the ability to fluidly navigate these remaining densities. We don't have to go in sequence 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We can fluidly navigate between them. And for that matter, we can also fluidly navigate the earlier densities. So with love of all, with unconditional love, we can fluidly navigate an entire octave. And as we mentioned earlier, there are multiple octaves. We can intuit that there are infinite octaves. But from what we've seen so far, it may appear that we take these octaves in sequence, which we can do. But recognizing that we can fluidly navigate the octave that we're in upon graduating to the paradigm of love of all, the paradigm of unconditional love, the paradigm of trust as the trust as the highest priority, we can fluidly navigate our current octave, and then we have the following octaves. Okay, let's hold that thought, and let's also look at this model of the octave as a circle. Everything runs in circles, so the line helped us to see the sequential nature of the octave, but ultimately everything runs in circles. So once we get to the eighth density, we're actually back to the first. We're at the first density of the next octave. And so weaving together the things we've seen so far, we can get to the core of this video, which is that the octaves can be perceived as an outward spiral. So we're circling and we're becoming larger in scale. So there's a fractal relationship. So circle with an outward aspect to it is a spiral, and that would also be described as a fractal circle. And so we can conceptualize the spiritual densities that way. And being able to fluidly navigate the current octave and recognizing the remaining octaves as fractal of the current octave gives us the opportunity through both of those pieces, through the fluidity of the current octave and through the fractal nature of the remaining octaves, there's the opportunity to potentially fluidly navigate all these octaves. And that's the gift to you. If it resonates with your heart, again, these are just suggestions, but if you think about the pieces there, if you have line of sight to your full octave and can fluidly navigate your full octave, and you recognize the proportionality, the similarity, the fractal nature of the remaining octaves, then through those two pieces, you can potentially navigate all these octaves, all these densities in a fluid way, and potentially save yourself some lives in the process. And there are no one-size-fits-all answers. Maybe you want more lives. Maybe you want the most lives you can get. So if we compare lives to eating an apple, you want to eat everything about that apple. You want to eat the leaves and the stem and the tree. You want the whole deal. So there's no one right answer. If that's what floats your boat, that's what you're meant to do. But if you want to just look at the apple and call it eaten because you've vicariously experienced what the apple is all about, that's sort of what we're talking about here. If you can perceive the other octaves, and the other octaves can conceptually resonate with your heart, do you really need to experience them? If your heart already understands them, if your heart is already harmonized with them, what else is it that you're seeking to learn? So if you want to really go far fast, this may be an opportunity to do it. And hopefully that's helpful for you. So happy holidays from your soul family. Again, extreme gratitude to the Tachi Yokuts, and extreme gratitude to our soul family member who appeared in this video. Beyond infinite blessings to the Yokuts, to our soul family, and to you. Happy holidays.